And from your perspective, what is the most significant risk posed by deepfakes, right? And how can they be mitigated? And how is your company able to address that?
So, thinking specifically about the risks of deepfakes, we don't directly try to identify what is misinformation, disinformation, or deepfakes, but rather we're focused on the dissemination of information. So we're doing what's called social media intelligence, or social media narrative intelligence specifically. And that allows you to understand what is the conversation that's happening and who's driving that conversation. Because I think too often the focus is how do we label something as deepfake or not, rather than think about who is spreading that information and where is this ultimately coming from. I'll give you a concrete example. Back, I believe it was maybe mid-year last year, there was that Pentagon explosion image that came up, which was generated by AI. Do you remember that? And obviously it crashed the market very briefly, came back, and we built a network after the fact to understand what were the accounts that were spreading that information. And we tied it back to a bunch of accounts that relate to a Russian bot farm. So now, knowing who those accounts were and how they spread that information, we can track what activity they are doing in the future to understand what narratives they're getting behind. And so we empower our users to understand what are the conversations that are happening and who are the people spreading that information. That's the approach that we're taking, first and foremost.
Thank you. The same question about yourself, Sandy, your company, and what do you do addressing deepfakes?
Yeah, so I have a perspective on it from a role that I had for the last 3 years. So I was the director of growth at Descript. And Descript is a generative AI audio video editing tool. In 2019, we actually launched one of the world's first consumerized text-to-speech or voice cloning technologies out there. So what our tool enabled you to effectively do is you could train on audio around your own voice, give consent to our tool, and you'd be able to replicate your voice so that you could use it to generate podcasts and other types of voiceovers for your videos. So we launched that in 2019. And in the early days, one of the risks that we had to mitigate was we had to figure out how to ensure that the person cloning their voice is actually the owner of the voice. So the topic that I care a lot about and I think is really, really relevant right now in this era of generative AI tools is the topic of ownership, which is if you are going to replicate yourself or the likeness of yourself, how do you ensure that the person who has access to the tools is actually the owner of that voice? And at Descript, we approached it from two fronts. The first one was in how we built the product. And there were a number of safeguards that we included as part of the verification process. For instance, in order for you to actually give us consent, you had to read off a customized consent statement stating that, I, Sandy Dow, or whatever your name is, you are actually enabling the platform to clone your voice. And then secondarily, matching that to an actual training audio clip. So long as those two matched, that would go through the system from a technology layer. We also had human in the loop as part of the review process, and then ultimately the end user could get access to it. But even that's not enough sometimes because you'll always have bad actors who figure out loopholes and get through the system there. So the second path that we took there was from a community perspective, twofold. The first was in our policies, in our terms of use, we actually set forth the fact that if we found out that you were either reported to have misused this and not cloned your own voice, we would instantly ban your account with no reason or rhyme around you getting access to the account again or to our product. So it was an instant lifetime ban. The second part of it, it really is a community effort, right? Like we can't be out there moderating content on other platforms, and so oftentimes people will actually report to us, or that content creator will actually say they use the product, in which case, even if we do see that externally and we validate that usage misuse internally, we will actually go ahead and ban the account as well. So, really kind of twofold there. And then the last thing I would actually say is that there's actually a really active body of companies and builders who are actively trying to prevent the misuse of generative AI tools to create harmful deepfakes. One of them include the Content Authenticity Initiative, which is actually run by Adobe and Descript and many other companies are part of that. But the Content Authenticity Initiative is very much focused on providing tools for builders that allow for companies to build a systematic form of attribution into the audio and video files that are generated. And so doing our best to propel forth the system to actually solve the attribution problem, which is challenging because not everybody is a part of this, but I think it's a really good step in the right direction.
brought some really good points, especially on the audio stuff that we're thinking about. Christopher, yourself, how about how do you address some deepfake? What are your biggest concerns?
So let's kind of take a step back for a moment and kind of look at the reality of where we're at. So we are in the most innovative, high impact time of technical distribution that we've ever known. And right now, we're in an AI arms race around the world competing. We're seeing platforms that were not as relevant as some of the bigger platforms that we've known through the application renaissance are skyrocketing right now. And these platforms such as NVIDIA, Microsoft, and others are at such a rapid clip of deploying AI infrastructure that I posed years ago, and I've been traveling around the world talking to different organizations, public sector, private sector, and the reality is what happens when the technology becomes more advanced than the technologist? And now that's come to pass. And so when we talk about artificial intelligence and generative models and diffusion models and what they're deploying, with the level of access that we have under the banner of deepfake technology, the reality is it's deepfakes and AI can only do what it gets its dictates from its native state of origin. And so when we talk about the political theater and what will be the ramifications for deepfakes, well, I hate to break it to you, but being deeply fake is not new in the world of politics. This is how we're able to create deepfakes, is because all it is simply a manifestation of its native state of data. So being that the situation that we're in, thinking that we're going to be able to deter the level of deepfakes that are now available and access to the common woman and man is erroneous. There's nothing that exists on the face of this earth that is going to permanently, or even at the moment, even change an iota of the trajectory of the amount of level of misinformation and disinformation that is already being deployed in political theater. Because the technology is at an accelerated clip. When it comes to the regulatory board, the United States is not going to slow down with the threat of China at its heels and what it's looking at when it comes to the deployment of capital, distribution, product distribution, and scalability. And that's the name of the game. So right now, we are very much living in a world where it's innovate as fast as you can at a breakneck speed and let the problems be the thing that naturally slows it down. But in terms of the level and the threat of the misinformation and disinformation that we're looking at, all we're seeing when it comes to being deepfakes is the visualization and also the auditory capability of what these models are already at simple AI level powerful of. But this time next year, everything that you know about AI will be completely disrupted because of the scale that we're on. When we reach the levels of artificial general intelligence, when we reach the levels of self-aware and theory of mind, scaling out consumer intelligence, cosmic AI, and all the different scale models, we have no idea what it is that we completely innovated. We have no way of putting on the brakes. And so right now, what we really have to start to think about with a greater sense of urgency is, do we have enough within us to innovate from the heart level and start to be able to create platforms and initiatives and actionable frameworks that are going to be able to protect the sovereignty of humanity itself, because we ourselves have disrupted our own selves. This is not the time of disrupting platform after platform. We are now in the era of disrupting our own selves. And if we don't do something about it now, with all the evidence that's in front of us, there may come a point where there is no point of return, and that's where we're soon headed. I've never seen this amount of deal flow and capital, and I am at these companies and corporations. I do this in a C-suite. I am advising them, and they do not have a lot of solutions, and a lot of this is keeping them up late at night. This is the truth. From the government to every other business in the world, Fortune 50 and Fortune 500, they're still attempting to figure it out. And so that's where we're at right now when it comes to the world of deepfakes, is that it's actually comes from us being deeply fake.
That is a scary thought. But there's hope. Now, the hope, anyways, what do you think is that can be catching up to this advanced technology, the speed of the development? What are some things that you think the hope is?
Well, I want to double click a little bit on what Christopher was saying, because I think it bears repeating that the pace of innovation is going to usher in, from all the trajectories, the curves that I've seen, AGI, not within 10, not within 5, but within roughly 3 years, probably tops. And if we have another breakthrough, it might even be faster. There is no room for second place when it comes to AGI on a national security level. The implications are obviously monumental for enterprise, for personal, for work, but at the national security level is the one that I think is most important to pay attention to. Because once you reach AGI, you now have the capacity to reach superintelligence, which is intelligence beyond the entirety of the human species. And the country and the way of thinking that wins what the future of humanity looks like. And Christopher is saying we also want to make sure we're aligned with that superintelligence as well, which is a separate related problem. But make no mistake, other foreign nations are going to try to compete with us on this, and so that is the main problem that we have to be thinking about. And as Christopher correctly alluded, deepfakes and all the other issues that come along with that are going to be casualties that we're going to have to mitigate as best we can in order to ensure that our way of life is preserved.
Well, that's some great response to Christopher said. Did you have a response to what Christopher said?
Yeah, just two quick thoughts. The first one is, I know that there's a lot of attention placed on deepfakes in particular because it's sort of a very visual, clear manifestation of somebody spreading misinformation or misciting the facts. But I actually think that there's a much, much broader landscape around misinformation more broadly, and that's the fact that a lot of the way that we consume content is actually being driven by another vein of artificial intelligence, which are machine learned algorithms, right? So there's something I call the TikTokification of content, which is if you browse Instagram or TikTok or any of these social platforms, once you start to watch content around a specific theme or story, the goal of that platform is to show you more and more content with the exact same story reinforced. So hypothetically, if you watched a video stating that the world was flat, YouTube, TikTok, all of these platforms have the signal that that's exactly what you believe and what you want to see more of, and thus it tries to present to you even more content, manifesting and doubling down on the fact that that is a fact, right? And so there's this skew towards information. So whether it's a deepfake telling you that story or even a human being in a talking head narrating that, it's still the same challenge. And so I just wanted to articulate, I think, kind of the solution here isn't necessarily we cut off deepfakes, then the world's at peace and we are all going to get factual information from social platforms. That's not the case at all. So I wanted to add that point to this. The second thing I wanted to add is I'm actually very optimistic and excited by a lot of generative technologies allowing more content creators to tell their stories and messages. There's actually a very pervasive trend in content right now. It's called the faceless influencer or content creator. So think about when you browse some of these content platforms, you come across a channel where there isn't necessarily a human being that's narrating the content. It's a lot of voiceover, a lot of stock images, maybe some B-roll and clips that you watch. It's a lot of very, very successful channels and influencers who are able to pull this off and provide really high quality content. And imagine some of the generative technologies that give that creator even more power to produce some of that content at scale and provide even more value to the rest of the world, right? And so I'm really excited about that application. At the same time, I think that one of the challenges and one of the necessary components of ensuring that we're all managing and using these technologies responsibly has to be a community-led effort. In fact, I think if companies right now and innovators rely entirely on regulators and just looking at the law to say what you can and can't do, firstly, I think it's going to be a bit of time before there's something that definitively states here's what you can and cannot do in black and white. But I think secondarily, regardless of what that law may be, the community at large is going to react first. Right, I think the interesting thing with AI, and more specifically generative AI, is that some of the earliest adopters of the technology are students and content creators. Because in their daily lives, they rely on these technologies to get their job done, complete their assignments, to study well. For content creators, more and more content is their livelihood. They rely on it to make money. And so in order for us to be able to agree upon and develop that framework, we have to invite the students, the content creators, and more broadly the community at large to sort of socially agree upon this is what it means to responsibly use AI.
Yeah, that's it's going to impact us all ages. Right? Now, with your work, right, and what do you want the crowd, right, the audience, to take back? What are recommendations that you have? Right? Especially, a lot of this can be deepfaked now. Right? They can
Well, I want to say this to make it clear that I love technology. I'm an emerging technologist. My dad was a technologist for UC Berkeley. I'm currently studying 270 technologies in the eco-habitat and the eco-convergent framework that I've been working on for the past 8 years. But I love people more. As much as I love technologies, I love people more. And if we're not innovating at the level of accessibility and education, community development, safety, privacy, wellness, ethics, if we don't take those things into consideration of what we're developing and building now, we may be afforded the opportunity of never having this one shot again. And right now, the world is so busy. Look, we've become more virtual in the past 58 months than we have in the past 58 years. Whether we realize it or not, we are in a transitionary period unlike anything we've ever known contemporary to our time. We've seen the farming evolution. We've seen the industrial revolution 1 and 2. We saw the information age. We've been to the application renaissance. What happens now that we've entered into the artificial intelligence era, where the majority of the people that innovate these products and platforms on the applied science level can't keep up with that? What we must do now, and I'll take the script from Professor Fei Li, who's one of the most brilliant-minded people on the planet when it comes to AI, and she's in Stanford, and she herself says that we need to develop a cloud consensus for World Economic Forum, for the UN, for UNESCO. My platform, Gatherverse, is one of the biggest gathering communities on the planet right now. We need to all come together and go through all the frameworks that are scattered across Earth and make some decisions on what's going to be actionable and what's not. Now, this is coming from Professor Hinton. This is coming from Elias Isterberg. This is coming from Fei. This is coming from Yevgeny Kuhn and others. And it's their progeny, their students are the ones that are deploying and building these models. We must take safety and privacy and wellness first. We only have a small window to do it. And if we don't tackle this, the ones that are sitting in these chairs now, and if we don't reverberate these messages, then I fear that no one will, and we'll find ourselves in a very competing situation and narrative. So one of us will be sitting here and saying, there's that guy that was on stage that talked about this 2 years ago. And we did nothing about it.
Thank you for your work in pushing that.
So it's my belief that we're fundamentally all going to have to become managers of AI to some degree. And so my recommendation, my parting thought here is that if you haven't tried out some of these technologies and even tried to perhaps deepfake yourself in some ways, generating your own video, avatar with tools like Hadrian, cloning your own voice with Descript, writing an email with ChatGPT, running market research with Perplexity, and the list goes on and on. If you haven't tried these yourself, I highly recommend you do, because I think the more you understand what the outputs are, the more clear it is of the limitations and possibilities are for yourself as well. And so by understanding and having hands-on experience, that's how you're going to best personally manage that risk and have a perspective on how the community at large can do so as well.
Yeah, I think what Sandy said is perfect. Tinker as much as you can. It's fun. It really is. There's such a richness of capabilities out there, whether you're artistic or more intellectual or anything in between, or just want to improve your workflows for your day-to-day job. It's all possible, and the only way to really understand the capabilities is to play with them. From the broader perspective of what we can do as a society, I was going to click on something that slipped my mind. It'll come back to me. So let's move on to the next question.
And the work right now in expression of deepfakes, we're just about time, but are there any final messages you want the audience to take back home?
I think as it pertains to deepfakes, there's no silver bullet. It's going to take a multifaceted approach, right? There's not some magical AI technology that's going to come along and be able to accurately depict every single deepfake. So we're going to need technology to help augment human judgment. We're going to need to create a lot of public awareness. So that goes back to the concept of tinkering, but also just for government officials to create awareness around the reality that this information is out there so that you can try to protect yourself against it and be more vigilant. And then we're going to need to work closely with the platforms to be able to show what is, or to be able to put some sort of information that says this is AI generated content to require content creators that if they are using AI generated content, and I know TikTok and probably other platforms are already doing this, to be able to say, yes, I'm generating AI content, and if you're doing so without delineating that, then there are corresponding penalties associated with it. So it's going to take a multifaceted approach, and if we do that, I think we have a decent chance of navigating.
Final word from Sandy?
Yeah, a quick one. Don't underestimate how hard it is to write a good prompt. So most of the interfaces for these generative tools are actually natural language prompts. And to get exactly what you want in terms of the desired video or image or even text that you're hoping for, it's actually really, really challenging. And so I think, play around with it, kind of the same advice I offered earlier as well, but don't underestimate how hard it is to actually, control these technologies and get exactly what you want with them.
Christopher, final word?
Sure. My final word will be that on the innovative level, if you're a founder, make sure you take a look around you, and if everybody in the room looks like you and comes from where you come from, you may be doing it wrong. Women leadership, communities of color, multi-generational, ageism, don't let that get in your way. Work with everybody under the sun. No matter the color, no matter the gender, I think you'll ultimately have a better product and experience.